13 minutes before 7. Well, you just heard from government about the US import tariffs and their package of measures that they've announced. Let's speak now to Business Unity South Africa, with BUSA calling for a coordinated national response and wanting a crisis response. We speak to Lunga, who's the Director of Economic Policy at BUSA. Very good evening, Lunga. Thanks for joining us on the Power Business.
Good evening, Tehillah, and good evening to your listeners.
We just heard from government, the Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, and they're announcing their package of measures. We saw the statement from BUSA saying that there really needs to be a crisis committee set up between government and business. Do you think that the measures that government has announced so far are strong enough to counter some of the very serious implications of the increased import tariffs?
Well, firstly, I think as business, we have expressed our concern regarding the recent implementation of the broad-based tariffs by the United States government and the proposal to introduce reciprocal duties on countries with trade surpluses, including our own. And of course, it has come to pass now that those tariffs will, in fact, be imposed by the U.S. It has been very interesting to note from the DTIC the package of economic response to the impending imposition of these tariffs. Now, some of the things that have been mooted there, I think, such as the establishment of an export support desk. There are also measures to assist companies to absorb some of the impacts of the tariffs in a facilitated long-term manner. However, I think what is concerning for us as a business is that a lot of these packages that have been announced by the department are really at a planning phase. Nothing concrete has come out of what has been announced by Minister Tau. If one gauges from some of the remarks that were made in the press briefing earlier this morning, seems to suggest that there is still a governmental process that needs to unfold before these actually come into the system. And so we are very much alarmed that it seems that the SA government has been caught on the back foot in terms of putting these packages together. And they undoubtedly then have exposed a number of our exporters and manufacturers within our productive sectors of our economy to some of these shocks that a number of the sectors will experience. However, we are in support of a comprehensive package, and what we are for as business is for government to engage business much more proactively for us to find a much more suitable way forward.
We heard from Minister Tau saying that it was very difficult to plan because they weren't sure what the tariff rate would be up until the last moment, and they weren't sure which sectors it would impact. So they weren't really able to make contingency plans until they had final confirmation. But I'm interested from you, have you been taken into the confidence of government? That's what DTIC says, that they've taken business into their confidence. Do you feel that way?
Well, I mean, there have been a number of engagements both between government and business. And on an ad hoc basis, we have been kept abreast of some of the developments when it comes to the negotiations. But what has been jarring for us is, however, what we perceive to be a lack of urgency in terms of moving the negotiations forward. You would recall that the framework deal was tabled with our U.S. counterparts in May, after the Liberation Day announcements. And post the tabling of the framework deal, no substantive progress had been made in terms of negotiations. And so what we feel is that there has been, at least on the part of government, what we sense is a lack of urgency. And of course, the GIC will say something counter to that. But it became very apparent to us that deals were possible with the United States. The countries such as the UK, Japan, Pakistan, South Korea, and the Philippines have been successful in ensuring that they reach an agreement with the US, which saw the reduction of the 30% tariffs. And so we believe much more greater and concerted efforts should have been put in to ensure that we get a deal over the line before the 1st of August deadline. And so it's within that context that we feel that there's still an opportunity post the 1st August 2025 deadline. And so the lessons that we should take into finalizing a new deal should encompass us being a little bit more proactive, but also ensuring that we push the envelope to ensure that we, to a certain extent, reach an agreement with our U.S. counterparts.
And what do you make of the South African negotiating team? Of course, we don't have an ambassador. Our special envoy is apparently not able to enter the United States. And the DTIC saying that it's actually not diplomats who negotiate trade deals. They have a very highly skilled team doing that.
I mean, we would have to take the DTIC at its word when it comes to having put forward a formidable team to lead the negotiations. And so I think that's more a question for the DTIC to answer. But however, we as business obviously have, we as business have taken note of the fact that there is no dedicated diplomat within the United States now. And we think that is very important to ensuring that we smooth over some of the relationships within Washington. And so that is not necessarily something that we can easily overlook and say that it's not a contributing factor. I think it would have been important for us to have a warm body in Washington to advance the South African position with regards to the trade deal. Either as it may be, we cannot cast aspersions on the DTIC. However, what we are more concerned about as business is how do we approach the next round of negotiations given the failure that we've experienced over the past 3 months.
Let's look forward then to how South Africa should brace itself for the impact of the 30% tariffs. And you've mentioned that there should be a coordinated response. What else do you think needs to happen in terms of supporting these industries and ensuring that there isn't large unemployment numbers?
Well, look, I think the tariff exposure for some of the critical productive sectors of our economy, including the automotives and agriculture, if you couple in the chemicals industry, it shows that the tariff exposure will lead to significant job losses within those sectors. And so it is important that as part of the way forward, we then begin to bring in the various sectors and the experts who sit within those sectors to start to plan on the mitigating strategies of how we can offset job losses, but also how we can ensure that our productive capabilities are intact. The tariffs themselves obviously would have a negative impact in terms of our global export competitiveness, and that is something that is of concern for business. And I think besides just a coordinated effort, what we think is very important is that structures or institutional arrangements should be set up in the near future, which ensures that there's a regular engagement between government and business, but also ensures that the expertise that sits at the level of the various industries and sectors get drawn into tailoring sector-specific interventions. What we cannot afford is for there to be a blanket approach in terms of the economic packages that will be developed. What we should be looking at is for more nuanced packages that speak to the realities and the context of the various sectors that are impacted by the tariffs.
How about opening up new markets? Of course, that's a medium to long-term strategy. It takes a while. What do you think about South Africa's efforts to try and realize new markets in the Middle East or even on the continent itself?
Well, as business, we believe that it's a very important tool in terms of the overall trade policy architecture. And so the diversification of markets should form part of a much more comprehensive and holistic package, which takes into consideration what the short-term interventions need to be. But to the point that you made earlier on, these are more medium to long-term. And so, therefore, they will be time-sensitive. It's not something that we can do within a period of weeks or say, even months. And sometimes in negotiating the access to new markets, that is something that can be very time-consuming. And so while we encourage it, we do believe that it should form part, as announced by the Minister of BTIC earlier on this morning, should form part of a much more broader package. And of course, we're in full support. I think one of the things that we have proactively been advocating for is for the seamless implementation of the Africa AfCFTA. But on top of that, I think there are great opportunities that exist within the European Union, in the Middle East, And of course, in Asia itself, I think China has come out very proactively over the last few weeks and months, to the point where they've announced 0% tariff on African products entering into the Chinese market. And South Africa is one of those countries that has been identified as a potential benefactor. And so I think it's important for us to see where the opportunities are for South African exports within these markets that are ready to do business with South Africa.
And how closely will BUSA be working with government? The next few months are going to be quite bumpy unless there's a major turnaround from the United States.
We as business anticipate that given the nature of the crisis now, which has the dire economic implications, there does exist a need for the formalization of the engagements between business and government and any other social partners. I think it will be important over the next coming few days that we treat this as the crisis that it is because of the potential economic implications. In the minister's joint statement this morning, they had announced that this will possibly have a negative impact on economic growth, with 0.2% of GDP growth being slashed from the potential growth of this year. And so it's very important that we treat it as the crisis that it is, and business stands ready to, as we have previously in various other scenarios, stands ready to partner with government in terms of ensuring that we find a suitable and long-lasting solution to these issues.
Right, thanks very much. That's Lunga Baloyi, who speaks on behalf of BUSA as the Director of Economic Policy and talking about the crisis there.